Okay, it works so before we start, but silence from now. And I introduce myself. Can I just, quick reminder, I know some of you have to check in, okay, for visa requirements. So please just remember to check in if that's your case. So within this link, you will find the relevant form and make sure you click the correct week to access this information. This is not for all of you, just for those who had visa requirements and they need to check in. I will try to remember to put it up every single lecture, okay, so you don't forget. But yeah. So I'll start in like 30 seconds, so I give time for everyone to arrive, yeah? Right, okay, so should we start? So my name is Sofia, and I'm going to be your lecturer for managerial economics. You probably already knew this if you already accessed the Blackboard page, which I will show you in a minute. I'm a senior lecturer in the economics department. Do you want to know a little bit of background about me? I was a lecturer before at the University of East Anglia, at the University of Huddersfield, and I worked for a while in research at the Center for Competition Policy. So actually my area of research is microeconomics, specializing in the creative industries, but I'm a microeconomics lecturer in general. Okay, so in case you need to contact me, I will ask you to introduce yourself, but we just have 2 hours, and you're a very large number. But I really hope to get to meet most of you, okay, at a more personal basis. I will always finish lectures around 10 minutes before time, and I will be in the landing for the remaining 10 minutes. So in case you want to come to talk about the lecture material, or just say hi, okay, I'll be there. But if you need to contact me for anything regarding the module, that's my email address, which you don't need to remember, it's pretty long, but you also have access to it in the teaching staff tab in Blackboard. And that are my office hours starting from next week. I think they don't clash with any of your tutorials for this module, but obviously you will have more modules, more tutorials, so if you are unable to come to any of them, you can always send me an email, okay, and we can try to arrange another time. And as I said, I will show you Blackboard in a minute. I will show you how to access my information and also your tutors' information. Yeah? By all means, if anyone has any question at any point, you can either ask directly in the classroom, or when we start the lecturing material, I will show you a Padlet, okay, in case you want to ask anonymously. But if anyone wants to join me also in the lecture, feel free. We have here a quite nice setting. Right, so let's start, before we talk a little bit more about the module, let's start about what are we doing here? What are we going to see in managerial economics? Yeah? And for this, we are going to see an example. So I also, by the way, like to use the visualizer a lot. So you have access to the slides 1 week ahead of the lecture. All of you can have access to the slides in your laptops. So I will post the slides on the sides, and whatever extra I do, it will be on the center because it's what is recorded. Okay? So in the recording, you will not see all the time the slides, but you will see like the extra material I do in class. But you have access to the slides anyway. Okay, so managerial economics is going to be concerned. Come on. Try to come on time to the lecture.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right, so managerial economics is going to study, is going to be concerned with the application of economic principles, and is going to study the concepts of decision making. Okay, so all of this, you already have a base or some basic introductions in microeconomics and in economics in general. I know you come from different degrees, but this is not going to be an issue for this module, so don't worry. So, okay, all these principles and this decision making, actually, we are going to see a little bit what we are going to see in the module, looking at an example which is relevant in today's news, and it's the shortage of staff in the National Health Service, which is the NHS here in the UK. So, as you have seen in the news, there is an issue currently with shortage of staff in the NHS. So the graphs, I know they are here a little bit small, but it's just to a combined explanation, okay? So what is happening is like the demand of NHS services is increasing at a high rate, and actually it's expected to increase, and does this work? It's expected to increase, and you can see that represented the expectation of increasing in demand in the purple line. The issue is like the personnel who is employed full-time in the NHS, it's not enough to cover this increase in demand. So what we have is a shortage of staff, yeah? So what I'm going to do here is just write the relevant concepts that I go mentioning, okay? Which it could be a shortage of supply in the labor market, is a shortage of supply of staff. Yes, so managerial economics is going to deal with this shortage. Is not just going to be from doctors, but it's also going to be from nurses, okay? So it's a general shortage of personnel. So managerial economics in this case is going to deal with resource allocation. And I'm sure all of us, if you've seen any economics, probably in the first 5 minutes of any lecture of economics, you've heard about the allocation of resources. It's the main concern of economics, isn't it? And in healthcare, one of the most critical resources is going to be skilled personnel, okay? So, see, the shortage of staff in the NHS is going to require managers, and so this is what managerial economics is going to look at, about to allocate these limited resources, which in this case is going to be the human resource, okay, and efficiently. So, effectiveness, which is another issue that economics deal with, is also part of this. Taking into account factors like patient needs, which in this case the patients are the consumers, so it's going to be consumer needs. Budget constraints, within the NHS, okay? I know it's a public service, but this is not for just for the consumers, but also within the National Health Service. And the cost of what? The cost of hiring a skilled personnel, and not just hiring this skilled personnel, but also to retain a skilled personnel. And there is going to be an additional cost here, which if you see more labor economics, you probably see about. And is that in this case, it is skilled, trained health professionals. So you cannot suddenly wake up one morning and say, like, oh, I'm going to apply to be a doctor, okay? Or a nurse. There is a whole training process. So there are some, like what is called the time delay, okay, in economics from how these people get trained. But it also explains why we need home market and the outside market although I'm using the example in this country, this is of course a general issue in other places. Another thing that you may think that managerial economics can explore in this example is going to be the labor market dynamics. Okay? And although we may see some labor market here, it is true that this is not labor economics. You probably see labor economics in the future. But still, the labor market dynamics is going to refer to the basic concepts of supply and demand. And all of you have seen also supply and demand. Sorry, my writing is not very good, you know. It's like the doctors, very good example of that. I took so many notes in my life that I lost completely the writing. But because I mentioned it, hopefully it will be nice. Okay, so this will help them to analyze the labor market strategies as managerial economists and as managers in general. This is gonna help the managers to attract and to retain the qualified healthcare professionals in a competitive market, which is what we have here. Although, do we have a competitive market in the pure sense of it? Am I forgetting, because I'm talking about managers making decisions, I'm talking about the consumers, that will be the patients. Am I forgetting any agent? No, I'm not forgetting it, but any relevant agent here that it will be very important in this market? But this is a public service, and the third agent that is going to be relevant in this market is going to be the government. Okay, so managers will have to make decisions, and will have to take into account staff motivation, will have to take into account productivity, of course, very important too. Productivity and organizational performance, which you will see more about if you see industrial economics. But they also need to take into account public policy and regulation. And that's when the government intervention comes from, right? Which actually is going to affect the decisions that they are going to make, okay? So to attract all this personnel, to sort out this problem of shortage of staff, then they are going to have to take into account what is the public policy at that moment and the implications that it can have on the public services, in this case of the NHS. So see what I have done here? What I've done is taking an example, something that you've heard about, and if you've not heard about, that's take a newspaper, okay, something that you heard about, and just explaining it, we've actually went through how managers can apply just economic principles to make, to sort out the allocation of resources, to talk about the labor market dynamics, the cost-benefit analysis, market forces, government policies, okay? So we've seen, just in 5 minutes, 10 minutes of me talking about this example, so many economic concepts that we brought together to explain this. But we've actually seen also so many concepts which we are going to see in this module, okay, and which we are going to apply. So you have some basic theory about these concepts. So what in managerial economics we are going to do is how to get to the application of these economic principles and decision-making, which, by the way, I forgot to add decision-making, which I mentioned at the start, but very important one in economics, too. Yeah? So using this example, more or less, I summarize what we are going to do in this module, which is not talking about the NHS, okay? It's talking about the different examples here. Right, so what is managerial economics then? I just explained with a practical example, but more theoretical is, it's going to be like science or the part of economics that is going to enable you to make strategic decisions, to allocate efficiently the resources, like, for example, in this example, but you have many other examples, and respond effectively to different issues that then may be happening, taking into account also, of course, the environment in which you are moving. So all of this is what we are going to learn in this module. Not just this, we are also going to learn to use, Excel, okay, to help us analyze the data, okay, and to help us with the application. You are not required to have a level of Excel. Some of you may be more advanced in Excel, you may not have used it normally, don't worry. So I will use it in the lectures, you will use it in the tutorials, and you actually have 2 workshops scheduled, which is new for this module. There were no workshops before, okay, and you will go through different examples. But you will have examination in Excel, and I will speak about it in a minute. Right, so this is the course schedule. You have access to this in Blackboard. So we are going to have, well, effectively 10 lectures, but we will have 2 practical lectures, okay, in which it will be more relaxed, it will be more like back and forth doing some exercises at the same time that we review the material of that term, which is just before the reading week and after the reading week. And the reading week is here on the week 30th of October. There is no lecture then. And then can you see that on week 7, or teaching week 7, which is the week commencing on the 6th of November, there will not be a lecture because you will have the online test at exactly that time. You will not be able to take it at another time, the online test. Okay, and I will speak about it in a moment, but it's a fixed time online test. Okay, so what resources do you have? Plenty. And if anyone is going to ask me, do I need to read all the resources for the module? Listen, this is up to you. I give you the resources. What you use is up to you. You have the slides. The slides are the basics. Okay, so just reading the slides is not enough to get a first. You come to the lectures. The lectures are, of course, to complement the slides. Okay, this is a summary. It's not everything that I say word by word, of course. And then you will have the recommended reading from the 2 core books that we have, which you have them in the reading list, and actually you have them here. So the first one relates more to the theory. The second one is to help you with Excel application. Okay. Whether you read the recommended material or not, I'm not going to follow you to your house to see, okay? So this is up to you. And then you will be provided with extra resources. So for every lecture, I will upload any data that I used in the lecture, okay? Anything that I've done in Excel, that will be uploaded to Blackboard. You could replicate it or not, up to you. You will have case studies which relate directly to the lecture, like today we are going to see in the case of coffee beans that we will see in a minute, and also some additional case studies, and I will talk about social media also later on. And you will have mock tests, okay, like a week before your examinations. Again, whether you do the mock test, whether you go through case studies, this is up to you. Do I recommend it? Yes, of course, yes, okay, but all of you are adults. How many notes do you have to take? Don't ask me also that question. That depends. Some people don't need to take any notes, okay, and just remember everything by heart. Some people need to take lots. I was the person that needed to take lots. So that's completely up to you. There is no requirement there. Okay. So first, let me show you, using this one, where you can access everything in Blackboard. 1 second. At the same time that I showed you the examinations. And then it just takes a little bit to come up, but don't worry. And then I will show you it'll come up, and if not, doesn't matter. Okay, so the individual assessment. So as I told you, on week 7 you will have an individual assessment, and this is an online test. Okay, that you will have to take on the, could be on the 10th of November from 12:15 to 1. If you try to take it at 12, it will not be open. If you try to take it at 10 past 1, you missed it, okay? Obviously, if you're as a student, you will have the extra time, okay? That's, of course. Right. This actually is going to be an Excel examination, so 48 hours before the online test. There will be a data set released with some instructions of things that you have to do with the data set. And then the online test will be based on that extra advanced work that you've done, okay? If we could please arrive at 12 or near to 12, okay, and no like at 12:20, that would be great. Okay. And this is not working because God knows why. Okay, so you will have lots of emails from me telling you about this, okay, so don't worry, you are not going to miss the test. 1 week before, and this will be the reading week, you will have a mock test available. And that will be last year's test. You will have the data set that they had to do, the questions that they had to do, and the online test. Okay, so you will have an example, and you will see what they did last year. And it went well, okay, so nobody panics, okay. Right, so this is 20% of your final mark. Another 20% of the final mark is your group assessment, okay, or group examination. So in groups that you don't form yourself, I'm going to form the groups, and I'll explain also. In groups of 5 people, 4 to 5 people, depending on how the distribution is, you will have to complete a report of maximum 1,000 words, okay? And in this report, basically, you will you will assume that you are a research team based in a firm that I will let you know about. You will have to do some Excel work, also some data, and you will have some questions, okay, that you will have to solve then. Okay, so there is in Blackboard, which unfortunately I cannot show you at the minute, but there is in Blackboard a folder which says Assessment Guidelines and Criteria. Open it. There are 6 pages explaining what do I expect on the report, okay, and have a whole rubric also with marking criteria there. Also, there is a whole explanation of why you are not going to be able to form the groups. And the reason is to replicate a real market scenario, okay, because you have to get used to work for someone else that is not your friend. It's not my first time forming groups, okay? I know you are hesitant at the beginning, but I promise you by the end everyone is fine with it. So 2 things with this. One is like you will have 1 submission per group, okay? The other one is like, of course, I know there can be free rider problems, and this is another economic concept, which I'm pretty sure you know about, but we can't, anyway, add it here if this one decides to work. There you go. Free riding, you know, I know there can be these issues, okay, don't worry, I'm going to account for them. By the end of week 3, you will receive an email telling you who is your group and with the email addresses of the group members. And I will make an announcement in Piazza and in Blackboard, I send this email. If you don't receive this email, then please let me know. Of course, I need to allocate your group. I'm going to allocate the groups within the tutorial groups, okay? So your group will belong to the same tutorial group. So it's easier for you also to find yourself and also for the tutors to identify the group. If within 1 week a group member has not get in contact with you, and I will also send you another email with this, then you let me know, and the first thing is like I will send that person a personal email. If that doesn't still work, then the tutors will approach that person in person, basically, okay? If that doesn't still work, don't worry, because after your submission, which will be on the 15th of December, which I think is the last day of lecturing at 3 p.m., you will receive an email saying, rate the contribution of each member, which hopefully you have agreed with your group, okay, what's going to be the contribution. You have all of this explained and access to these documents in Blackboard, but basically you will have to give the contribution of each member from 0 to 1, being 1, maximum participation, 0, this person has not shown up at all. Be reasonable here, okay? Don't tell me 0 because I didn't like the way that person dressed. That doesn't count, okay? And in fact, if you are going to give less than 1, I will ask you, give me a reasoning, right? Because I will read the reasonings, and it needs to be reasonable. So can you get a higher mark than your submission? Imagine I submit a group coursework, my group gets 80. No, you cannot get more than 80. I know in some courses you can, in my course, no. That's your submission. Is there something that you wanted to add and the group decided not to add? Bad luck, okay? Fight for it. Right? Unfortunately, there is no way for me to measure that you participated more. So the maximum mark that you can get is your submission mark, but you can get less, okay, if you participate less or even 0 on this. So then your final mark will be calculated with an average of the contribution rates of how the rest of the team marked you. So this is to encourage you also to participate in the group. Yeah? Have a look at the marking criteria, have a look at the assessment guidelines, because obviously if you have questions, come and ask me. Okay, and then finally, I don't know where I left the, the pointer. Okay, yeah. And finally, the final exam, okay? So the final exam is 60%, so it's the remainder marks, yeah? And it's going to be, and this is just due to the fact that you are a very large number. Listen, I hate multiple choice. I used to hate them as a student, so I understand, okay? But, so 12 questions, so 60 points of final exam will be a multiple choice. You will not have to do any Excel or data preparation before the final exam. That doesn't mean that I will not give you a regression and tell you, oh, I've done this in Excel. What is the meaning of this? A, B, or C, okay? That, yes. And then 40 points will be a discussion question. It's a short discussion question, 1 paragraph maximum, okay? You have 1 hour and a half, but you can do the exam in 1 hour, okay? So the 1 hour and a half is just to allow for technical problems. It will also be fixed time, so they will tell you, I don't know, they will tell you like January the 20th, I don't know if it is January the 20th, I'm making up this, okay, at 10. And everyone will have to start at that time, and you will have 1 hour and a half from that time. Make sure you have Wi-Fi connection, make sure, you know, like obviously if there is any IT problem, contact us as soon as possible. And you will have a mock test before, and you will have plenty of discussion questions, examples that I used before, okay? So you will be trained for this, don't worry about that. Okay, so silence again. I'm going to give you 5 minutes break in 10 minutes, okay? So don't worry. I think I'm not forgetting anything about the course. Anyone has any question about how the course is going to run? No? Right. Something that I do, and this is a new project, okay, that we are doing together with William Taylor at Lancaster University, is to use social networks to complement my teaching. And this is because we want to advance the curriculum in economics, and I will explain our research project in a minute. So please, if you want to follow us. So basically what we do is to bring economics to life. So I will take concepts that you normally see in the classroom, okay, and we make like some type of, well, sometimes it's post, sometimes it's type of comedy videos that we try to do with our daily life, yeah? So we started this project last year, and the aim of the project is to use posts, reels, and stories that bring economics to life, but also we try to implement a research-led curriculum, okay? But not just giving you an article that I may not understand, or you may not understand because you don't know econometrics enough, but to try to address some case studies. We also provide a whole range of free case studies, okay, for students and for educators who want to use them, for some people that are interested in economics. Is it, of course, it's a voluntary thing, okay? There are going to be some of them that are related to the course, and I will embed that in Blackboard so you will know about it. But there may be some that I used last year that also are relevant for you. Now, there is a research project going on with this. Obviously, no student data is used, so don't worry about this. And we've already presented this across the UK, but we want to go further with this. And so for this reason, this year we are going to run pre-started questionnaires and post-starting questionnaires to say whether social networks influence actually your capacity of understanding concepts. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes break now, and if you could actually answer of some of you. Again, no information of you is asked here because it's completely anonymous, okay? This like short questionnaire that takes 1 minute, that will be brilliant because it will help us with our research of advancing the curriculum in economics teaching, okay? And if not, it's fine, I will never know because it's anonymous. So, like, you will have 5 minutes break before I start the actual lecturing, okay? You can go to the toilet if you want. Or answer the question. Gonna see what's going on here. One second. Okay. I managed to make the computer work, my laptop. The 5 minutes is over. So silence now. Thank you. So so you have here, just very quickly, you have here Blackboard, okay? You have a video of me explaining everything on how to access the module. You have here the course schedule. This is the assessment guidelines and marking criteria folder that I was telling you that you should access. Complementary Excel videos, but if you, for example, go to week 1, which is the first week of teaching, you have access to the schedule this week, suggested what you should do, and you see in the learning objectives, you see the precise reading for the second book, and the complementary material, and it says, so there is an Excel video showing you what I'm doing here in Excel, plus different case studies. So I give you all this information available. Next week will be available just after we finish this lecture, okay? Okay, so also, Piazza, if you have any questions which relate to the lecture now, okay, and you don't want to put your hand up and talk in front of everyone, which, by the way, there is no stupid question, there is no wrong question, so do it by all means. I can for sure tell you that if you have a question, the person next to you has the same question or very similar. But if not, you want to post a question anonymous, this is the Padlet for every single lecture, okay? So just post your question. Just during the lecture. If you post today at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to read it, okay? Then after the lecture, you need to go to Piazza. I cannot access the Padlet at the same time that I teach, so it will be after the first break, and your question will be answered at some point, but not probably immediately. Okay. So, what are we going to do today? You are all of you from different disciplines and different degrees, okay? And what I'm going to do today is to show you, and we are going to combine this with application, okay, an Excel application also, so we start already introducing also Excel, show you where all of you should be. So for some of you, you've seen this in macroeconomics in theory, okay? Some of you may have seen it more or less, but what I'm going to tell you, this is where we're starting, okay, seeing the applications. The first lecture, the first hour, will always be an introduction, will be more theoretical, the second more practical. Right, everyone should be familiarized with this. What is this? It is a demand schedule, yeah? And what a demand schedule is telling me is an indicator of in a specific market, for every price level, what is the aggregated quantity demand for one good. Everyone knows this. If you don't remember this, you are going to need to take a book, okay? But it's okay. In the core book, it explains this. Right, so I got the demand schedule of Big Mac, and actually, and there is a reason why I got the Big Mac, okay? The Big Mac is actually quite important in economics because since years ago, the economists released the purchasing power parity, which is the Big Mac index, in which it shows how the PP varies across the countries using the example of the Big Mac. Right, and in fact there is a post in the Instagram after this that I did going through different airports. I travel a lot for family reasons. So, right, actually the real price of a Big Mac in the UK in July 2022 was £3.19. So this point here is the real one. The other ones, I made them up, okay? So I don't know how much they will demand people if the price of the burger was this. I really don't know, okay? But that one is the real one. Right, why can we use, why is it relevant for a manager, or why is it going to be relevant for us to use a demand schedule? But the reason why is it going to be relevant, you have this in Blackboard, okay? So the data set, by the way. The reason why it's going to be relevant is because we can form here the demand function, okay? So if we have a demand schedule like the one that we have here, you want to, and this is very specific, lots of times when you have data, there are going to be gaps in data, okay? And you have to estimate them, and we will see estimation too. But if we have a perfect demand schedule like the one that we have here, then we can actually draw the demand function. So if you select the relevant variables in Excel and you go to insert, and I'm going to do it wrong in purpose so you see, and then you select a line graph. See, this is not really what we actually want, because by default Excel is giving us this like graph. So I'm just going to drop the title. So if you double click in the graph and you go to select data, here in the horizontal axis, always, okay, when you do a demand function, and this in first year could be, okay, this person forgot about it. In the second year, if you don't give me the quantity in the horizontal axis, it is bad, okay? So make sure you remember that. Okay, so in the horizontal axis, we are going to have the quantity, so you can actually select the quantity. And in the vertical axis, we can eliminate the am I eliminated the wrong one? Yes. Yeah. So we can't actually say the price. So you see, we have exactly the same demand schedule, like here, okay, with the price points and the quantity of the, and the quantity of burgers in here. And they did it. Is it the other way around in here? Why I did that? God knows. Probably. So, but in the Excel, we're going to do it correct. Don't worry about that. So you can remove this one, sorry, and then in the horizontal axis, you can have the price, and you can have the series values. Oh, no. Oh, sorry, yes, you see, this is what you shouldn't do. You need to do it the other way around. Sorry about that. Okay, so, fucking hell. Exactly. All of this can go really wrong. So let me redo it from the start. Sorry about that. Okay, so we do this. Right, we have the quantity, which it was correct in the first place. Yeah. Okay. Okay, you select the data. And then if you remove this, what? Okay. Cancel. Let me redo what I had done before, which it was actually correct. Okay. So you edit the horizontal, and you actually put the quantity of burgers, okay, not the price. And from here, we should be eliminating the quantity of burgers, isn't it? No. We should be actually adding the quantity of burgers. All right, then, you know. Okay. Okay, yeah, and we're still eliminating this. Right, so we're going to have the downward sloping demand. I'll check the numbers later on. But here it should be obviously the quantity of burgers. Do you remember what I told you, what is very bad? Okay, this Excel didn't recognize it, okay? But it should be the quantity of burgers in the quantity demand. Okay, so let me actually do it here for you. So if we have the quantity of burgers and the price, just so if we go to the demand schedule, and let me put the demand schedule so I can see it. Here, yes, so if the price of the burger is going to be high, right, so we are going to have a demand schedule. So the larger the price of the burger is going to be highest demand. And do you know what's the problem here? It's like that switch around. So it's going to be a larger demand. You are not seeing what I'm writing, sorry about that. Yeah. So it's going to be downward sloping because the higher is the price, right? The lower is going to be the demand and vice versa. So the lower is the price, the higher is going to be the demand. Sorry, because it takes ages to warm up. Okay, good. It's going to be the higher the demand. So when the price is 5 here, when the price is actually 5, yeah, the demand is going to be 0. And when the price is 1, yeah, the demand is going to be around 6. And we don't arrive to higher levels of demand. Okay, so that's what is happening here. So that's what you have with the law of the demand in this case. Now, if we continue with this graph, and then that's similar to the slides that you have, remember that when you have movement of prices, what you have is a movement along the demand curve. Yeah? So a movement on price is not going to externally affect the demand at any point. However, there could be different shocks that affect the demand, and this could be a positive or a negative shock. And you know about this. So think about the Big Mac. If, for example, I offered you, all of you, a 1 pound voucher of the Big Mac, what are you going to do? You are going to demand more Big Macs, if you like them, of course, because it's going to be relatively cheaper. So this is really important, which at the same level of prices, what you are having is a shock in the demand curve, which is positive. And this will be a parallel increase, a parallel shift. But if, on the contrary, for example, the Burger King, and let's assume that Burger King is a substitute, Burger King decreases the price of the Whopper, then relative to the Whopper, the Big Macs are going to be cheaper, and so at the same level of prices, people will demand less Big Macs, and so you will have a shift to the left, right? Everyone should know this. Similar to the supply function, with the supply function, what we are going to have is an upward sloping curve, okay? So let me come back directly to here. So what you are going to have is an upward sloping curve with the supply function, in which we are going to have the price. I will update the graphs, okay, don't worry. I didn't realize in the slides were incorrect. Which will be an upward sloping curve, okay? And similar to this, if you have a movement in prices, this will just be a movement across the demand. But if you have an external shock affecting the supply, for example, cost of production increases, then at the same level of prices, they will supply less Big Macs because it will be more expensive to produce. New entrants in the market, if you remember Micro 2, then there could be, okay, so this could be an increase in the cost of production, and this will be more suppliers for the same level of prices. So we could actually have changes in the prices, like, for example, coming from taxes that you have there, or we could actually have things that are external, okay, shocks to the supply, which it could be taxes applied to a substitute good. This is an external factor that will affect either the supply or the demand, depending on who is affecting. Here you have something that is called time periods of adjustment lengths, and last year is the one that more controversy created. Okay, this is just because sometimes, and we're going to see now an example, when there is a policy applied, there is a time delay. Okay, so it could initially be an external shock affecting the demand or supply of a market, but takes time for the equilibrium to adapt. Okay, and why is this relevant? Because we are going to analyze markets, and it is not just, I mean, I know you know the basics of doing a supply and demand, but what you need to understand is that actually is that basics on the supply of the demand, which explains all the variability when in the markets when we need to explain, for example, this market for coffee bean prices, okay? So it's all these basics that explain that. So here we have the world demand of coffee beans. And coffee beans, we're talking about the production, not you asking for a coffee in a coffee place, okay? From 1996 to 2016. On the left-hand side, you have the price points, okay? There are different ways of representing a demand, not just the introduction to economics one that you saw, which it is in US dollars because the case study is in the US, although this is the world market. And per pound, which if I remember well, it's going to be 2.2 kilos, okay? But trust me, I'm still, it doesn't matter how many years I've been in this country, I still struggle with the pounds and stones. So you can research that anyway. And each price point will correspond to the millions of 60 kilobucks. So here actually we do have an equilibrium in a market, okay? So equilibrium in basic example, so in basic graph, is when the demand and supply comes together. Yeah, that could be the equilibrium without the shocks. But this graph, if you have a case study, if you have here what has happened in the market for coffee beans, this is representing me the variabilities in an equilibrium. And you need to understand very well what happens here to being able to write a report about this. Yeah? So what, for example, happened here, and you have a case study which relates to this uploaded to Blackboard. So although, I can tell you that although this graph shows the demand from 1996 to 2016, in reality the demand for coffee beans continue increasing, okay, in fact exponentially. The exports of coffee beans continue increasing exponentially from 2017, and around 2020, 2021, it increased over 18%. So it's a good, which is one of the most traded commodities in the world, okay, plus it keeps increasing in popularity. So you can see that there's a huge variability in price and demand of coffee beans. Something that is not really reflected in the price that you pay for a cup of coffee in if you go to Starbucks or if you go to Costa, you don't go and suddenly one day it's way cheaper and suddenly one day, well, now it's expensive for you because of inflation. But, you know, you don't see all this variability. And I'll ask you about that in a minute, or why not, okay? But see, for example, here that there is huge variability in this equilibrium. And in this case, so we have a big drop in the price, okay, in the market price. This could be from late 1990s, start of 2000s, yeah? So just a little bit of background. Most of the demand for coffee at that period of time was coming from the European Union. It was 42% of the coffee demand was in that area. It was followed by the US and Japan at that period of time. What happened there is that there were new entrants in the market, and this was Vietnam and Brazil. So there were like more plantations, okay, and so the supply increased exponentially. But what happens if the supply increases and the demand doesn't? And this is where the time delay will come. So in the next slide you have it, but I'm going to do it so we have it at the same time here. So see if we go to the basics, to the basic graphs that you are used to do. And we do have the demand, and we do have a supply. What happens if we have new entrants in the market? But in principle, the price is not changing. Okay, so at the same level of prices, what you have is a positive shift of the supply curve. So at the same level of prices, what you are going to have is a shift of the supply curve like this. We'll see that initially what you had here is this equilibrium for the market of coffee beans, but now because of this increase in the supply, if the price and the demand doesn't adapt dynamically, what you have in equilibrium is a big drop in the prices. because what you have is an excess of supply. No, this is what you saw in Introduction to Economics. Well, if you go to the equilibrium of the coffee beans market, which is here, this is translated in a big drop. So there is a crisis in the production, okay? And this actually brought several problems for producers, consumers, and sustainability even. So just these basics that explain here that you used to explain that is going to be used to explain what is behind here. So you can actually see that after this, the demand adapts, okay, and keeps increasing. They realize, oh, wait, the price is much lower. So at some point, the market dynamically adapts. There may be intervention behind it, okay, so many times there is intervention behind it. It actually peaks in mid-2008. You know why the demand increases? Not because people said, well, I'm going to dose up in coffee now that it's cheaper, okay? It's because it became actually very popular in China and Russia. Suddenly, coffee and big populations, big increase in demand in the world coffee, okay? But however, it peaks in 2008. Why do you think peaks in 2008 and then starts decreasing? What happens between 2007 and 2008? You may not remember it. I remember it, but it was a big thing. Financial crisis? Yes. The financial crisis. Huge one. We're still talking about it. Imagine, okay? So, and what happens? The first thing in the financial crisis that happened, big decrease in demand, okay? There is a big decrease in demand. Supply is not adapting. Again, we have an excess of supply. And what's going to happen again? A big drop in the price, okay? Oh my God, I really hope it's okay, the computer, okay? So big drop again in the price because of this financial crisis. Second drop, again, was in 2014. This is not due to a crisis, okay, as I know. This is due because Brazil, which by that time was one of the biggest producers, had well, the worst drought in like a decade. And of course, if we have illnesses in the plantations or any type of thing that will affect production, again, what we are going to have is a disequilibrium, which until it adapts, it goes up. Now, at the beginning, I said, you can see a huge variability when you look markets like this, you know, in the demand and everything. However, you are consumers of coffee. Some of you may be consumers of coffee, and you don't go to your coffee shop, and you don't see this big variability in prices in the coffee that you order. However, all of this is going on the coffee beans market. Why do you think is that? Why you don't see this variability on the price of the cappuccino that you order every morning? Or whatever type of coffee. But there's just a small percentage of that price that goes to the coffee beans producers. So that will be represented by a very small part. In the retail market price, you will also include, well, like service, staff wages, okay, and anything which relates to the production of your actual coffee, yeah? So all of that things then will go to another market. So here we are talking about general equilibriums. We are not talking about partial, we are talking about partial equilibriums, okay, which will help us to explain the general equilibrium, but it's not just about that. That helps us to explain different pointing variabilities. Okay, so see from the demand schedule, from the basic law of the demand that you saw, we actually were able to analyze a real coffee market. Okay, from here, you will have to give recommendations then to the producers. Okay, so this is the whole area of the module. You will need to know the implications of that. Do you actually have to always to analyze any market, to always have price and demand at the same level? No, okay, you don't. You can actually analyze a market looking at the different variations in prices and different variations in quantity respectively. I'm going to try to change to the laptop, but given that it takes so many ages, probably not, but I can drop a video explaining how to do this later on. It's not, oh my goodness, it's not an issue. Okay, so if you actually look at the demand of toilet paper, you may think it's a really funny good, okay, to look at, but it's such an interesting good to analyze in economics. We could actually, what we could do is to look at how much the price and the quantity, and I really hope this works, Margaret, has changed. Yeah. Okay, so if we actually have in the horizontal axis the year, yeah, and we remove this one, yeah. And the data was correct here, that's why it worked. We could actually represent the variability on price, and if you do the same, and I will leave that for you to do, you can see the variability of quantity. And actually here is a really good example to put these two graphs together to see where the external shocks in the demand, where that shifts in the demand that we were talking about were. So can you say that in general, well, there is an ascending tendency in general, very slow. There are some shocks that relate to each other, like for example, 2019, what happened there, COVID, okay? You have like, so different things that relate to each other, or a spring inflection problem that is here, but I will explain that in a minute. But the variability in quantity is much bigger than the variability in prices. Why is that? Because of the external shocks. So that excess on variability in quantity are the shifts of the demand curve that we talk about. Remember that you always, all you had to say, otherwise you will have lost marks in your exam. At the same level of prices, the quantity increases or decreases. Yeah? And that at the same level of prices is because there was no variability here, but yes here. So the price has some variability. This is the biggest one, but not very significant. The quantity, huge. So the thing with toilet paper is a very interesting good because first of all it is an essential good, and if we go to the slides, actually the next slide that you have is exactly that. So just a quick reminder, essential goods are the goods whose quantity are not going to change much when there are variations in prices, yeah, which is what you have in the slides. So we'll talk about elasticity in a minute, but this is the issue with essential goods. This means that in periods of crisis or in periods of prosperity, the demand quantity should not change much, okay? That's what is an essential good. However, some essential goods, and the last crisis had taught us this in economics, like for example toilet paper, are counter-cyclical, okay? So, for example, in this thing that is in red here, this is the financial crisis. Okay, just with Lenham Company was about to collapse, which is the whole start of the financial crisis. Suddenly there's a huge increase of demand of toilet paper. People spend more time at home, okay, the demand decreases also for other goods for that reason. We could talk about a million reasons why this happened. Then it decreases, and this is the period of the recovery from the financial crisis. So you see, the variation is counter-cyclical. Prosperity decreases, that. Okay, if something touches this peak to the top that corresponds to the decrease in prices, it is a decrease in price under quotations because what happened was shrinkflation. Have you heard about shrinkflation? So in reality, the size of the product varies. Maybe the price will not change, but the size of the product changes. And maybe there was a decrease in prices. This is a bit subjective because the consumers see it as a decrease in prices, but in reality what is happening is like there are less toilet seats in a roll, okay? So the price in real terms, it's actually remaining the same, but then this is a whole thing of consumer theory. So that's what increases. But it's something the COVID-19 pandemic also saw us, is this counter-cyclical pattern, okay? Consumer panic buying of toilet paper, this was a big thing during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that explains the increase. All of that, except the shrinkflation part, okay, is explained by shifts in the demand. So you should be able to take this graph, you should be able to take the demand schedule and explain that, oh, here there was variation in prices, for whatever reason, you will need to research that, or here there is actually a shift in the demand without me telling you, there is an increase of consumers in the market at the same level of prices, it shifts the supply. No, you should already see that in a graph. Yeah? And this is how we see shifts. Right, so, right, let me say this, and then I will do another 5 minutes break, just because otherwise it's a lot of theory in one go, okay, and I don't want to overwhelm you too much. It depends on how we are doing. If you're okay, no. Okay, so we are talking all the time about aggregate consumption, about aggregate demand, but of course, remember that consumer theory tells us, so if I could draw a demand schedule with your preferences, for example, for buying toilet paper or coffees or Big Mac meals, okay? But in reality, what we are actually analyzing behind this demand curve is the individual preferences of all the consumers that I have in a market. What we are going to have, we're going to be more concerned with in this course is about the purchasing power, okay, of the goods and the substitution effect. So the relatively effect of a variation in prices that can have insatisfaction in the consumers. Yeah? Nothing new again. So remember, and again, I'm gonna, no, sorry, I forgot my computer was working. Okay, so at the same time, I'm gonna try to put the slides here, yeah? Okay, so remember that this is how we look at individual preferences. So first of all, I'm gonna be, so what the consumer does, so the main aim of economics, I mean, in second year, you cannot tell me it's money like the first years tell me, it's maximization, okay? In the terms of consumers, I'm not concerned about maximizing your satisfaction, you know, that's the utility. Now, utility is going to come represented by the preferences of different goods. To simplify, we use two goods. So imagine that you have films. Think about these films that you go to see in a cinema in 1 month, okay, against other forms of entertainment. And actually, this is going to link to a research paper on the second lecture. This is why I choose the example. Okay, so first of all, you will be happy consuming the more you can. However, what happens? That you don't have all the money in the world. And that's going to be our restriction or the budget line. Remember, the budget line will depend on the prices of the goods and the maximum budget that you have. And this is why it is on a straight line. The indifference curve will be the graphical representation of your utility function for a given level of utility. Yeah? Everyone knows that. So within the same indifference curve is the same level, is the different combinations of goods for the same level of utility. Where do you maximize, where a consumer maximizes satisfaction? In the tangent point. Why it is in the tangent point? Because maths tell us so. No. Why? Okay. And something about this course, by the way, I don't care if you know how to, I care if you know how to maximize a utility function. I don't care if you don't understand why. So if you don't understand why, it's not a pass. Okay? You need to understand the maths. What is the reasoning? Okay? And this is really relevant because it's not just about doing, in fact, the maths that we're going to see are not that. Okay, so is this in the tangent point? Because it's going to be the maximum consumption of that two goods that you can have given your restrictions, which is the price of the goods and the income. So any indifference curve about this is not affordable. Any combination of goods below the budget line, it is affordable. You don't want it because you are less satisfied with this one here. Okay, that's why it's in the tangent point. Whether it is more at the top, less at the top, or in the middle, this is not random either. This is going to depend on the preferences of the goods. So you are used to see Cobb-Douglas utility functions, the weights on that. So if it is x squared or x cubed, that's actually your that's indicating your preferences over the goods. Okay, whether you prefer one or more or less, and that's actually indicating whether it should be up or down. Now, why are we interested in this substitution effect? Because imagine that we have a decrease in the price of films, so films become cheaper. You could actually think about it like Netflix subscription also. If films become cheaper, you have a relation of the budget line. If you want, I can do it step by step. It's easy. Right, so if you have a decrease in the price of a good, you have a rotation of the budget line. Very quick, and just because, as I said, because you come from different degrees, and some of you will have seen more economics than others, the reason is because, well, the price of this good, of the other forms of entertainment is not changing, but the price of films is decreasing. So the total amount of films that you can watch, given that you don't do any other forms of entertainment, increases because it's cheaper. So relatively, it's also going to affect other forms of entertainment, okay? Because it's more expensive now relatively to films. What happens then? Your budget line rotates, and now your optimal satisfaction point is also going to change. You will be willing to reach a different indifference curve. Why not this point anymore? Well, this point, no, again, because it is below the budget line, so you can't afford it, that combination. Okay, you could choose it. You don't want to choose it because now you could be happier. So we move here again. Whether it is above, below, or in the middle, depends on your preferences. So here I'm just making an assumption. So now you have that optimal point. Now the problem with this is, like, as a consumer, you cannot compare this E1 with this E2. Well, we can compare it, but you cannot actually compare it to see how much your actual level of satisfaction relative to the change in prices has changed in economic terms. Okay, because we have completely different purchasing powers conditions, which comes from the budget line. Okay, and this is not comparable in economic terms. So what we are going to do is to remove the purchasing power effect to see how satisfied you will have been with these budget conditions on the original indifference curve. And that will give you the intermediate point that you know, and how we compare substitution, which will be more related to the relative satisfaction. And it is not in the slides, but obviously income effect too. So what we are doing is to remove the purchasing power effect. So you will have the substitution effect that comes from the relative change in satisfaction, which will be from E1 to E3, and the income effect from E3 to E2. Yeah? So we saw this, so this is a summary of how it will affect different goods. And that's that. Right. You know, I'm going to give you 2 minutes break, okay? Just so when we start with equations to introduction of econometrics, you don't get overwhelmed. But just 2 minutes, okay? And the reason is because I did the other break a bit early. Okay, that's 2 minutes gone. Right, so why again this is relevant? So something that we are going to start from next week is to see econometrics, okay? And econometrics sounds very fancy, it's not fancy. So what we want to do, so all these things that we've seen so far, or all this introduction, where we should stand at the moment, is going to be relevant to consider all the factors that affect to single individuals, but also to aggregate demand, okay, in a market. And this is like a huge number of factors, and it's going to depend on the market. So this is a generalization, okay? But we are actually going to see specific examples now, but during the course, like millions of them. Now, more direct one, the price, which we are going to concentrate today. The price of the product is going to be one of them. We'll look at the example of the Big Macs, of the toilet paper, price increases, demand decreases, direct effect with that, okay? But also, we are going to have the price of the relevant goods, and this could be the substitute and the complement goods. The income that you have will also affect the goods, and in fact, how it will affect demand, we know the concept of elasticity that we're going to review in a minute or so, that it is going to also it's going to give us information of what type of good we are talking about, okay? This is going to be relevant to know. Well, for managers, it's going to be relevant because if you have to make decisions on the price, or you have to make decisions, so let me put this in the same, or you have to make decisions on the on advertising. Okay, you want to know the market that you are working on, but you are also want to know the type of good that you have, whether it is more of an essential good or a luxury good. This is going to be, otherwise some policies will work and some policies will not work, or some strategies will work or not. So many factors can affect the demand of one good. As I said, depending on the market and the type of good, some of them will be relevant, some of them will not be relevant, okay? Right, so the first thing, so today, before we go to econometrics last week, we are just going to revise the concept of price elasticity. Why? Because the first thing that we are going to see with regressions is, and don't worry if you've never seen a regression before, because we will see this from scratch, is the concept of elasticity. And that actually the data, you need to identify elasticity in the data, okay? And what's the price and the relationship with the price and quantity. Okay, so remember price elasticity of demand, quick, okay, we are going to see the two differences on the price elasticity of demand and which ones we can identify with regressions, or depending what we are measuring. Now, the most common measure is going to be the price elasticity of demand, which remember is going to be the percentage change in quantity when we change the price in 1%, okay? Retaining everything else constant, okay. So here, different things. One is like, imagine we have a demand curve here, right? It's not going to be the same if, you know, in a graph, I ask you to calculate the price elasticity of demand on this point or in this point. The price elasticity of demand can vary within the demand curve, yeah? If you just have to calculate the point price elasticity of demand, regressions results are going to be really useful with this, we will see, okay? And that could be one different value for here and one different value for here, depending on where we have the market equilibrium or the market that we are analyzing will be different or not. But what about if you are to calculate the price elasticity of demand in this segment? But this formula is going to change the result, it's going to give you a different result if you calculate the change from here to here, or if you consider your initial point here, okay? So imagine this is point A and B, and I tell you calculate the price elasticity of demand of the change from A to B. But if you take the change from A to B, everyone will get the same result. But if some of you take the change from B to A, you will get a different result, even though it is the same segment of the demand curve. To avoid that, then, and this is the second type of price elasticity of demand, to avoid that, we use the midpoint elasticity of demand. Yeah? So this is the difference between the two formulas of price elasticity of demand. Would you know which one to use? But yes, because it depends if we are asking the point price elasticity of demand or the price elasticity of demand within a segment, right? Ultimately, it will be your decision, but if you are analyzing the price elasticity of demand within a segment, you could reason, I'm using the midpoint price elasticity of demand, so it doesn't matter if you take it from A to B or from B to A. A point elasticity of demand in a single point, then you go to this formula here. Yeah? So a quick reminder of the differentiation of the two types of calculation for price elasticity of demand. Right, so how is this price elasticity of demand relevant? And I said, well, for managers, it could be very relevant because what you want to know is the type of good that you have in, and I'm going to put the graphs at the same time at the table, okay, so we see it in the comparison, so you remember the type of good that you have. And that's what the price elasticity is telling you, is the type of good that you have, but also more information about this good. So here at the top you have the two extreme cases in which is perfectly elastic and perfectly inelastic, okay? So perfectly inelastic will be when the elasticity equals to 0, so the demand is 0 responsive to changes in prices. Perfectly elastic is 100% responsive. But normally you will have the intermediate cases. So if you have this type in which is less than 1, which it means that the demand is not very responsive to changes in prices, you could say, oh, it could be an essential good like toilet paper, and this is why it is inelastic. Okay? But it could be that it's a good that doesn't have close substitutes also. So if you don't have close substitutes, there is nothing else you can substitute with this good, then maybe big variations in price doesn't affect much the demand. So if you, for example, have big number of substitutes, could be that is elastic. Think about butter and margarine. These things are subjective. For you, maybe substitutes. For other people, not. Okay, but then they're more likely to be like this. Why? Because if the price of one of them increases, this is going to have a huge impact in its own market, but also in the substitute market. Okay, so you decrease drastically the demand here to consume the other good, and an elastic demand may tell you that, there are close substitutes, may tell you also that it's a good that is not essential, and so there would be big variations. But, so could tell you different story. Then you will have to research what it is. Similar, well, sorry, yeah, that's the, okay, so within the demand curve, not the whole demand curve, so the cases to explain it is elastic, inelastic, or are just the basic examples so we understand elasticity. But a demand curve doesn't have to be just a straight line, okay? And in most cases it will not be a straight line. So within the different segments of the demand curve, we will find different types of elasticity. This is also the reason why to calculate elasticity at the different segments. Normally, but it doesn't have to happen, okay? We have that is more elastic at the start, okay? When the price is higher, then it could be more variability on the quantity demanded, and then more inelastic at the end, because there is a point in which the price becomes too cheap, okay? Could be, well, that still, it doesn't make huge effects on demand, the type of... another thing, actually, which you could see with this elasticity or inelasticity of demand is which market we are analyzing. So there is this very nice case study which I didn't upload, but I can tell you about Buddhist economics, okay? And sometimes religion or costumes or habits in a country may have a big effect in the elasticity of demand for specific goods, okay, or beliefs that you have. So it could be that actually the elasticity is telling you that. The elasticity is telling you also the behavior for some types of habits in that specific market, okay, and not just about. So there are so many things that elasticity can, the story that it could be behind, okay? And that's what research is for, to research what's happening there. right? So this concept of price elasticity of demand is directly related to sales. And now what I'm going to do is to leave the graphs here, and we see the demonstration of the sales in the center. Okay? Right, so, Okay, so it's going to be directly related to sales. Now, I hope you've heard about the total revenue, okay, before. So, what we have is the total revenue, right? Remember, so we have the demand, which is consumer related, how this is going to be relevant for managers in terms of sales. So the total revenue is going to be the price times the quantity. And in fact, what about if I go doing it at the same time that I showed you, because it may be easier for you to follow instead of, we'll never be able to connect the laptop again, but that's fine. Okay, so, wow, suddenly changes really quick. Right, so remember that the total revenue is the price times the quantity. Now this price here, that you see here, what it is? This price here is going to be the inverse demand curve, okay, which you have in the graphs at the top. So the inverse demand curve, remember, is an equation, and it is defined as where A and B are constants, yeah? So the marginal revenue is a concept which is going to be the change in the total revenue that results from a change in quantity. So if we increase the quantity, so this is actually the definition of a partial differentiation. So if we change the quantity, or the quantity consumed of these good changes in 1 unit, yeah, what's going to be its effect on the total revenue of that firm? And that's what the marginal revenue is telling you. So if we represent the total revenue here and the marginal revenue, which we will see this later on, but for now just believe me, it's always twice as steep as the demand curve, okay? Here, then when the marginal revenue equals exactly to 0, we are reaching the maximum total revenue. See that when the marginal revenue corresponds with the price elasticity of demand, unitary price elasticity of demand, okay? Which is the one that is 1 unit change in price will be exactly 1 unit change in quantity. We're going to see why. Okay, so what is then the relationship between marginal revenue, which is going to give us information on total revenue, and the price elasticity of demand? So basically what I'm going to do here is just the maths that you have in the slides, okay, which you already have in the slides, so I don't need just to replicate the slide. But you are going to see what is the process. And I will leave the graphs so you can actually see how it goes relating to the graph. Right. Remember that if we take this total revenue, we are going to do this. So we are going to differentiate the total revenue with respect to the quantity. So you will differentiate the first term, which is an equation depending on quantity, with respect to the quantity, yeah, times the second term without differentiating, which is quantity, plus the differentiation of the second term times the first term without differentiating. So what is this? This equals 1, yeah? So differentiation of Q with respect to Q is equals 1. Okay, it's just a number, it's not the equation. So if I just simplify this 1 second, so it looks a bit nicer. So we are going to have the differentiation of P with respect to Q times Q plus P, the price, yeah? So this is where this comes from. Okay, so now what we are going to do And so we can have a relationship with the price elasticity of demand. So basically what I want here is to convert this term to something related to the price elasticity of demand. So I can see how this graph relates mathematically also to sales and price elasticity of demand. So what we are going to do is to multiply and divide by P, by the price. So when you multiply and divide by the same variable, the effect should be exactly the same because it's like multiplying by 1, okay, an equation. Okay, so if you multiply and divide by P, the whole equation, so what we are going to do, you have it in the slides, okay, but if we divide and multiply, but no step by step, and multiply by P, by the price, yeah, then, so we are going to take that equation, so we are taking the marginal revenue equals, let's do it all together. So this over Q times Q plus P, we divide by the price, and we multiply by the price. So in reality, you see, we could simplify this too, yeah? Okay, see that here we can actually have this divided by P plus price divided by price will be exactly the same, yeah? So if I do this, I'm saying exactly the same. So I have Q divided by price plus the price divided by the price times price. And this again, I have a 1, yeah? Here, can you see it? But more importantly, okay, what do I have here? So see, let me just take this 1 second. If I show you this like this, so Q over P, does this remind you to this a little bit? Yes, inversed, yeah? So what do I have here is the inverse of the price elasticity of demand. Good, we are finishing then. Okay, we are finishing with this equation and with the class. Okay, so this is 1 over the price elasticity of demand. You already have the relationship. So basically from here, then we know that the marginal revenue, yeah, equals 1, which is this 1, plus 1 over the price elasticity of demand times price, which is this one. That's it. That's how it relates mathematically. So this thing that we've seen graphically here, that's how it is related. So why is this relevant at all for you? So yeah. So see that, for example, you have it there, if we are in the unit elastic part, yeah, then the marginal revenue is 0. Exactly, total revenue. Yeah, so we are in that part of the equation. This is what it's telling me. You are reaching maximum revenue. But if, for example, we have a good whose price is £34, I don't know, a pair of jeans, okay, could be £34. Yeah, and so if we have a good which price is £34 and a price elasticity of demand of, I don't know, minus 1.33, okay, remember that interpretation is in absolute terms, okay, it's always negative, the price elasticity of demand because of the law of the demand. Now, we know that it will tell us that the increase in the total revenue will be around £8.46 if you calculate it, okay, if there is a unit change in the demand, okay, so it can tell you the variability with respect to total revenue you will have for changes in the demand. So it relates to changes in prices and changes in the total revenues. And this is how this concept is not just going to be relevant for how our consumers are behaving in one market, but also it's going to be relevant for you as managers in terms of total revenues. Okay? So price elasticity of demand becomes very relevant for different reasons. It just explains here. So elasticity is often key to the marketing plans, okay, that you are going to make. Consumer area in terms of promotions, for example, in terms of advertising, okay. I'm trying to change now the computer so you have the slides here. In terms of advertising measurements, okay, but also in terms of the revenues that you are going to have, are you going to increase or decrease your revenues if you make changes in the quantity demanded with the different policies? Okay, more decrease, no, but how much is going to increase? Yeah. Right. So the price elasticity of demand. It's a concept that you can see. Also, we said that there are different variabilities per markets, but actually some examples here. Okay. So how much? So, for example, even within a market or even within the same type of goods, okay, which could be alcoholic drinks, in this case, like beer, wine, but you have here, again, coffee. We've seen a lot of coffee in the, even if it is just regular or instant coffee. Can you see the price elasticity of demand can have big changes? So it's not like, it doesn't have to, I mean, from 0.16 to 0.36, although it is still inelastic, it's still a change because it goes from 0 to 1, okay? So I think a big difference. Even the dentist visits, okay, has big variations within gender, okay? So it could be that it's telling us even information about gender, even information about age, even information about how different types within the same type of good behaves. And it's also going to have information about whether a good positions as a superior good, okay, also a luxury good, or a more essential good, and so on. And this can change also within the same type of goods. So related to elasticity, it's not just going to be the price, it's also going to be the income of my consumers having a specific market, and depending on the level of how the increases or decreases in income affect the demand, it's going to tell us whether it is a normal good or an inferior good. Remember, we do have given goods, which is an example of inferior goods. There is just one real example, which is when the price increases, demand increases, so goes the opposite relationship to the law of the demand. Just one real example in life, which is the crisis of the potato in Ireland in the 17th century. So, then also advertising elasticity, and this is completely relevant to managerial decisions. So whether an increase or decrease, if it is a corporation who does advertising, whether an increase or decrease in advertising is going to have an effect on the demand, okay? This will be the advertising elasticity, which you probably didn't see before. But you could actually do so if we come back actually from to the equation that we saw at the beginning, actually the relationship at the beginning of, after the second break. So actually the relationship that the demand is going to have with the different variables is type of an elasticity, okay? What we are seeing. So the percentage changes. It's also going to give us information about substitutes or complements, okay? So whether there is an increase in relative good, in the price of the relative good, that increases or decreases demand. If it increases substitute, if it decreases, okay, it's going to be a complementary good. Examples of substitutes, price and Coke. I said before, well, tea and coffee, given that we saw coffee. But I also said before, butter and margarine. You have many. Examples of complements. For example, the frame of the bike and the wheel of the bike, but also the most common example that you've probably seen, car and petrol, is an example of complement. This is actually done many research on how the different price elasticities can affect different types of markets. And if you, for example, go to the electricity market, and you will see this example in the book, if you happen to read the recommended reading, okay. Go to the electricity market. you can see how, or they studied how the price elasticity has an effect on it, but also income elasticity. And can you see that the natural gas, which do you think is a substitute or a complement? Which is a substitute, okay? Because the elasticity is positive, but also because of the relationship of the goods. So then will affect the demand of elasticity. So these three types of elasticity will actually affect the demand of elasticity. It's not just about one, it's about a combination and how the different types of elasticity combine to affect the demand. Okay, so all this reading from the book, I mean, you see a lot of lines here, but it's 1 page or 2 pages, okay? Is the one that relates to what we've seen today. All the complementary material is also there. I'll see you next Friday. You have also tutorial 1, okay, next week. Have a nice weekend.